The day everything changed. Christian stood in the doorway of the diner, his hands still shaking. It wasn't from the cold. It was from anger, from humiliation, from a pain he couldn't name. He was 34 years old, but at that moment he felt like a boy again, too small for the world. The morning sun streamed in through the establishment's dirty windows, illuminating the empty tables. It was still early, only he and the boss were there, and those words, those damned words, still echoed in his ears. "You're incompetent, Christian, a dead weight. I only don't fire you because I feel sorry for you." Macon had said this in front of everyone the day before. In front of Pamela, the colleague he secretly admired. In front of Beatrice, the cook who was like a mother to him. And Christian hadn't responded. He just lowered his head and continued working. But something inside him broke that night. He spent hours awake, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment, thinking about the life he had built, or rather, the life that was left for him. Christian had worked at that diner for 7 years. 7 years serving burgers, cleaning tables, smiling at customers who barely looked at his face. He had no family. He had no real friends. He only had his job and the hope that one day things would get better. Macon owned the place, a tall, deep-voiced man who loved to flaunt his power. He treated employees like replaceable parts, like objects. And Christian was always the preferred target, maybe because he never fought back, maybe because he was too quiet. That morning, Christian arrived earlier than usual. He had a decision to make, a decision that would change everything. But he didn't know yet that what was about to happen wasn't just about him. It was about all of them. Christian entered Macon's office without asking permission. The boss looked up, surprised, irritated. "What do you want, Christian? Can't you see I'm busy?" But for the first time in 7 years, Christian didn't bow his head. He looked Macon in the eyes, and he felt something different. Courage. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice firm. Macon laughed, a short, unpleasant laugh. Christian took a deep breath, and then he started talking. Not about being fired, not about anger, but about something he had discovered the night before. Something that would change everything. What Christian was about to reveal was not just a secret. It was the truth about who Macon really was, and about who Christian had always been, but never had the courage to show. And in that moment, standing there, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Life before the storm Christian always woke up at 5 in the morning, not because I needed to. The diner didn't open until 7. But because sleeping was never easy for him. Thoughts came like waves, one after the other, without stopping. He lived in a small apartment on the 2nd floor of an old building. A bed, a table, a chair. Nothing on the walls, no photos, no mementos. It was as if he was passing through life itself. Every morning the routine was the same. Black coffee, no sugar, 2 slices of bread, quick shower. And then the 20-minute walk to the diner, watching the city wake up around you. Christian enjoyed this moment. The silence of the still empty streets, the streetlights going out one by one, the sky changing color. It was the only moment of the day when he felt at peace. The diner was on a busy corner, between a laundromat and a pharmacy. The sign flickered erratically. Half the bulbs had burned out, and Macon never bothered to replace them. Inside, the smell of grease and stale coffee permeated everything. Christian was in charge of opening the place. He had the keys. Macon said it was an honor, a sign of trust. But Christian knew the truth. It was just more work for no extra pay. He turned on the lights, unlocked the doors, turned on the kitchen stovetops. I prepared the coffee. I counted the napkins. I organized the condiments, everything on autopilot, everything as it always was. Beatrice arrived around 6:30. She was a black woman with kind eyes and always busy hands. He'd worked in the kitchen longer than Christian. He was the soul of the place. "Good morning, my son," she always said, with that smile that warmed the chest. Christian smiled back. A small smile, but a genuine one. With Beatrice, he didn't have to pretend. She saw him, really saw him. Pamela arrived at 7 sharp, never a minute earlier, never a minute later. She was a waitress, but she always seemed to be somewhere else, thinking about bigger things. Blonde hair tied in a ponytail, green eyes that sparkled when she laughed. Christian felt his heart race every time she walked in. Not that he had the courage to say anything. He never did. He just watched from afar, guarding every little detail like a secret treasure. Macon arrived last, always around 8. He walked in as if he owned the world, and in a way, in there, he did. He walked past everyone without saying hello, heading straight to the office. The cafeteria filled up quickly. Workers headed to the factories, students, retirees. The noise of dishes, conversations, the coffee machine beeping. Christian served, cleaned, smiled. He always served, always cleaned, always smiled. But inside, he was empty. It wasn't unhappiness, it was absence. As if he were just a body fulfilling functions, as if real life was happening somewhere else, far away from him. Pamela sometimes stopped beside him, leaning on the counter. "Tired today, Christian?" she asked. He shrugged. "I always am," he replied quietly. She looked at him with something like pity. Christian hated that look. He'd rather be invisible than pitied. But at the same time, it was the only time anyone actually looked at him. Macon appeared from time to time, shouting orders. "Faster! The coffee is cold! This table is dirty!" He never praised. He never thanked. He only demanded. And when he was in a bad mood, the target was always Christian. "Why are you so slow? Why don't you think? Why are you still here?" Christian swallowed everything. He always did. Beatrice used to say, "One day you will get tired, my son." Christian shook his head. No, he wouldn't tire. He could handle it. It was what he knew how to do. But Beatrice looked at him with those wise, sad eyes, as if she knew something he didn't yet know. The days repeated themselves. Weeks, months, years. Christian no longer dreamed. He didn't plan. He just existed. Until that day, everything changed. The day Macon humiliated him in front of everyone. The day Christian felt something he had never felt before. Not just anger, but desire. The desire to react, the desire to be seen, the desire to live. When the pain becomes unbearable. It was on a Tuesday that everything fell apart, an ordinary day. Nothing suggested it would be any different. But sometimes life changes in the simplest moments, when we least expect it. The cafeteria was full. It was lunchtime, and all the tables were occupied. Christian ran back and forth, balancing plates, taking orders. Pamela did the same, with that efficiency he had always admired. Macon was especially angry that day. He had fought with his wife on the phone. Everyone heard, and when Macon was feeling unwell, he made a point of spreading the poison. Christian carried a plate to table 6, a burger and fries. The customer looked and frowned. "I asked for it without onions," he said. Christian felt his stomach tighten. "Sorry, I'll change it now." But when he returned to the kitchen, Macon was there. He had heard everything, and his eyes shone with that cold fury Christian knew well. "Again, Christian, again you mess up?" Christian tried to explain. "It was just a misunderstanding. I can—" Macon stepped forward. "No, you can't, because you're incompetent." The words fell like stones. The kitchen fell silent. Beatrice stopped chopping onions. Pamela, who was taking an order, froze. Macon continued, his voice getting louder and louder. "Do you know how many times I've covered for your mistakes? How many times I've had to make excuses because of you?" Christian felt his face burn. His hands were shaking. He wanted to disappear, to vanish, to cease to exist there. But Macon didn't stop. "You're dead weight, Christian, a burden. I'm just not firing you because I feel sorry for you, because no one else would hire you. Every word was a stab, every syllable a deep cut. Christian looked around. He saw Pamela looking away, embarrassed. He saw Beatrice with teary eyes, holding a knife tightly. He saw the other employees pretending they weren't listening. And then something inside him snapped. It wasn't a sound, it wasn't visible, but it was real, like a thin branch that bears the weight of the snow, until suddenly it can't anymore. Macon turned his back, satisfied with the damage he had done. "Get back to work, and try not to mess up anything else today." Christian stood still, breathing slowly, trying not to cry. Pamela approached, lightly touching his arm. "Ignore him, Christian. He's an idiot," but her words, however gentle, did not reach the wound. Beatrice came next with that motherly look. "You're better than this, my son. Don't let him break you." Christian nodded, but it was a lie. He was already broken. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Christian served, cleaned, smiled at the customers, but inside he was absent, floating away from himself. When the diner closed, he was the last one to leave. Macon had already left as usual. Beatrice and Pamela had too. Christian stood alone in the shadows, staring at the overturned chairs on the tables. He thought about not coming back the next day. He thought about simply disappearing, leaving the keys in the door and leaving. But where to? To do what? He had nothing. He was nothing. That night, Christian couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling of the room, and the questions came, one after the other, without mercy. Why did he hold on? Why didn't he react? Why did he let Macon treat him that way, year after year? Did he deserve that? Was Macon right? Christian got out of bed around 3 in the morning. He turned on the dim kitchen light. He made coffee, and then, without really knowing why, he opened the drawer where he kept old papers. There were old bills, receipts, nothing important. But at the bottom, yellowed with age, there was an envelope. An envelope he hadn't opened in years. Christian took it with trembling hands. He knew what was inside: a letter, a photo, things from a past he tried to bury. He opened it, and when he saw the contents, something changed. It wasn't an explosive revelation. It was something quiet, profound, as if a locked door inside him had finally opened. In that envelope was the truth about who Christian really was, about where he came from, about what he had lost, and more importantly, what he could still recover. He spent the rest of the night reading, remembering, feeling, and when the sun rose, Christian was no longer the same. He was still afraid. He was still in pain. But now he had something else, purpose. He knew what he needed to do. And I knew that by doing this, nothing would ever be the same again. Not for him, not for Macon, not for anyone in the diner. When courage finds the way, Christian arrived at the diner that morning with the envelope folded in his pocket. He could feel the weight of it, as if he were carrying stones. But it wasn't a burden. It was a responsibility, truly. Beatrice knew the difference as soon as she saw him. "You look different today, my son," she said, studying his face. Christian gave a half smile. "I am," he replied, "and I'll be even more different." Pamela noticed too. She watched him for a few seconds as he tied his apron. "Did something happen?" she asked curiously. Christian shook his head. "Not yet. But it will happen." Macon arrived later, as always, with that arrogant attitude. He didn't even look at Christian. He simply walked straight into the office, and Christian let him. He waited for the right moment. The morning passed slowly. Each minute seemed like an eternity. Christian served the customers, but his mind was elsewhere. It was in the words I needed to say, in the confrontation I needed to have. Around 10 o'clock, the cafeteria emptied out a bit. It was the interval between breakfast and lunch. Christian took a deep breath. It was now. He walked into Macon's office without knocking. The chief looked up, irritated by the intrusion. "What now, Christian? Did you miss something again?" Christian closed the door behind him. The gesture was simple but meaningful, and Macon noticed. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" "I need to talk to you," Christian said, his voice firm. Macon laughed, that mocking laugh he knew so well. "Talk? About what? About how incompetent you are?" Christian didn't answer. He just took the envelope out of his pocket. He placed it on the table, between the two of them. Macon looked at the envelope, then at Christian, confused. "What is this?" Macon asked, his voice losing some of its arrogance. Christian sat down in the chair in front of the table without asking permission. "It's about you, Macon, and about me, and about the truth you don't want anyone to know." Macon's face hardened. His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Christian pointed to the envelope. "Open it." Macon hesitated. For the first time, Christian saw fear in his eyes. It was just a flash, quick, but it was there. Macon took the envelope, his hands not as steady as usual. Inside were old papers, documents, a black-and-white photo. Macon took everything out slowly, like someone disarming a bomb, and when his eyes fell on the photo, he froze. The photo showed two boys. One of them was Macon, younger, maybe 10 years old. The other was a smaller boy, with big, shy eyes. They were holding hands in front of an old house. "Where did you get that from?" Macon whispered, his voice hoarse. Christian leaned forward. "From the same place you hid." Macon looked up, and Christian saw something he had never seen before. Panic. Christian continued, each word heavy and careful. "That boy in the photo is me, Macon, you and I, 24 years ago, when we lived in the same orphanage. When you promised you'd never abandon me." The silence that fell over the office was thick, suffocating. Macon dropped the photo as if it were burning. "That doesn't prove anything," he said, but his voice was weak. Christian pulled out one of the documents. "A record of the orphanage. Prove it. We're here, Macon Turner and Christian Hayes. Foster brothers. You left the orphanage at 16. You were adopted. You had a life." "And left me behind," Christian continued, his voice shaking now. "You promised me you would come back, that you would get me out of there. But you never came back, Macon. You never looked back." Macon stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "That was over 20 years ago. I was a child." Christian also stood up firmly. "I was a child too, Macon. A child who waited for you every day, who stayed in that place until he turned 18, who left with nothing, with no one, because the only person who mattered forgot me." Macon ran his hand over his face, disturbed. "Why did you never say anything? Why did you work here for 7 years without telling us who you were?" Christian felt tears burn his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. "Because I wanted to see who you became. I wanted to know if the boy who promised me a family still existed somewhere inside you. But you know what I discovered, Macon." Macon looked at him silently. Christian continued, his voice breaking. "I discovered that you have become exactly the kind of person who hurt us when we were children." The words hung in the air. Macon staggered, sitting down again, his head in his hands. Christian could see his shoulders shaking. "I didn't know," Macon whispered. "I swear I didn't know it was you." Christian shook his head wearily. "You didn't know because you never looked. You never really saw. You never cared. They were silent for a long time." Outside, the sounds of the diner continued. Dishes, voices, life went on, but inside, time seemed to have stopped. Finally, Macon looked up. His eyes were red. "What do you want from me, Christian?" "Revenge." Christian was silent for a moment, thinking. "No," he said softly. "I don't want revenge, Macon. I want you to be the man you promised to be. The one who cared, the one who protected, the one who didn't abandon." Macon closed his eyes. A tear ran down his face. And Christian realized that for the first time in 7 years, he saw his brother, not the cruel boss, but the scared boy who had also been left behind. When the past meets the present, The days that followed were strange. Macon didn't yell at Christian anymore. In fact, he barely spoke to him, but he also didn't talk to anyone. He was different, withdrawn, lost in thought. Beatrice noticed the change immediately. "What happened between you two?" she asked Christian as she chopped tomatoes. Christian just smiled slightly. "The truth, Beatrice, only the truth." Pamela was curious too. She saw Christian in a different light now. There was something about him, a quiet strength that wasn't there before. "You did something, didn't you?" she asked one day, leaning against the counter. Christian drained a glass thoughtfully. "I just said what needed to be said." Pamela tilted her head, and he heard. Christian looked at the office, where Macon was locked. He listened. But listening is only the beginning. Understanding is another matter. Pamela nodded, not fully understanding, but respecting his silence. A week after the conversation, something changed. Christian arrived in the morning and found an envelope in his backpack. It had no name, just a sealed white envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was shaky, hesitant, like someone who hadn't written in a long time. Christian recognized the handwriting. It was Macon's. The letter began like this: "Christian, I don't know how to begin. I don't know if I have the right to write this. But I have to try. I need you to know that I haven't had a peaceful night since that conversation." Christian sat on a bench in the back, reading each word slowly. Macon wrote about memories, about the orphanage, about the difficult days, about how he and Christian shared the same room, the same fear, the same loneliness. He wrote about the family that adopted him, how they were kind at first, but cold later, how he never felt like he belonged in that house, always an outsider, always in debt. And then came the part that made Christian stop breathing. Macon wrote, "I didn't forget you, Christian. I abandoned you. And I did it because I was afraid to go back, afraid that I wasn't good enough to save you." Christian felt his chest tighten. He had never thought of it, that Macon didn't return not out of cruelty, but out of cowardice, for fear of disappointing, for fear of failing. The paper continued. "I built this life trying to prove that I was worth something. But in the process, I became everything I hated. I became hard, cruel, empty." Macon ended up asking for something. "No forgiveness," he wrote. "I don't deserve forgiveness. But time, a chance to make amends, to be the brother I promised to be, even if it's too late." Christian folded the letter, his hands shaking. He didn't know what to feel. Anger, relief, sadness. All of this at the same time, mixed, confused, heavy. That afternoon, Christian looked for Macon. He was in his office, as usual, but the door was ajar. Christian knocked lightly. Macon looked up, his eyes tired, vulnerable. "I read it," Christian said simply. Macon nodded, without saying anything. Christian entered, closed the door, and sat down. "You're right," Christian began. "You don't deserve forgiveness. At least not yet." Macon lowered his head. "But," Christian continued, "I also don't deserve to remain stuck in the past." Macon looked up, surprised. Christian took a deep breath. "You want time? Then use this time to change. For real. Not just with me, but with everyone here." Macon frowned. "What?" Christian leaned forward. "Stop treating people like objects. Look at them, Macon. Really look at them. Beatrice makes the best chocolate cake I've ever tasted, but you've never tried it. Pamela studies at night to be a teacher, but you never asked. There's a whole world of stories here, and you never paid attention." Macon listened in silence, every word weighing on him. Christian stood up. "What about us? I don't know if we'll ever be brothers again, but we can start by being human to each other." Macon waved, his voice caught in his throat. Christian walked to the door, but stopped before leaving. "Oh, and Macon, that day you humiliated me in front of everyone?" Macon shrank, embarrassed. Christian continued, softer now. "You need to apologize, not just to me, to everyone you've hurt." And then Christian left, leaving Macon alone with his thoughts. Outside, the diner was alive with voices and laughter. Christian returned to work, but something about him was different, lighter, freer. Pamela approached, curious. "Are you well?" Christian smiled. For the first time in a long time, a genuine smile. "I am, Pamela. I think I finally am." She smiled back, and Christian felt something flutter in his chest. It was no longer just pain. It was hope. Small, fragile, but real. Beatrice watched everything from afar, stirring the soup. She smiled to herself, knowing something important was happening, that the healing, even if slow, had already begun. That night, before closing the diner, Christian saw Macon leaving the office. He stopped in the middle of the room, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. And then, almost imperceptibly, Macon whispered, "Thank you." Christian just nodded. There was nothing more to say at that moment. The road would be long, but for the first time, they were walking in the same direction. When wounds start to heal. 2 weeks have passed since the letter, and the diner was different, not physically, but in the air, in the energy. There was something lighter, more human, circulating between the tables. Macon started slowly, small gestures that almost went unnoticed. He arrived early and helped set the tables, and for the first time in years, he greeted people by name. "Good morning, Beatrice," he said one morning as he passed the kitchen. Beatrice almost dropped the pot in fright. She looked at Christian, who was cutting bread, her eyes wide. Christian just shrugged, but inside he was smiling. It was strange to see Macon trying, clumsy, insecure, but trying, like someone relearning to walk after years of being paralyzed. Pamela was the most suspicious. "He's faking it," she told Christian as they arranged the menus. "Or he's trying something. I don't trust him." Christian understood her resistance. Macon had hurt a lot of people, and wounds don't heal with good mornings and forced smiles. "There's time," Christian said softly. "He needs to prove it, not just talk." But Macon was proving it, little by little. He began to praise Beatrice's cooking. At first she ignored it, thinking it was sarcasm, but when he repeated it the next day and the next, she began to believe it. "This sauce is incredible, Beatrice," Macon said one day, tasting it straight from the pan. Beatrice stopped, surprised. "You really think so?" Macon nodded. "I always thought so. I just never said so." Beatrice felt something soften in her chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a possibility. "Well," she said, trying not to smile, "about time you noticed." With Pamela it was more difficult. She kept her distance, always alert, waiting for Macon to return to his former self. Until one day, he did something unexpected. Pamela was carrying a stack of dishes when she tripped. The dishes flew, smashing on the floor with a loud crash. Everyone stopped. They looked. They waited for Macon to explode, but he didn't scream. He bent down and began picking up the pieces. Pamela stood frozen, not understanding. Macon looked at her. "Are you hurt?" Pamela shook her head, still in shock. Macon continued picking up the pieces. "It's okay. We'll replace the dishes." And then he looked at her with something that seemed like sincerity. People don't. Pamela felt her eyes sting. She hadn't expected this. Christian, who was watching from afar, felt pride and fear. Fear that it was too late. Fear that the damage would be too great. But then something happened that changed everything. It was a Friday, the end of the workday. The cafeteria was empty. Only Christian, Beatrice, Pamela, and Macon remained. Macon left the office, his hands nervous, holding a paper. He cleared his throat. "Can I talk to you guys? Just a minute." Everyone stopped what they were doing, suspicious. Macon stood in the middle of the room, vulnerable. "Me," he began, and his voice faltered. He took a deep breath. He tried again. "I need to apologize." The silence was thick. No one moved. Macon continued, the words coming out with difficulty. "I treated you horribly for years, and there's no excuse for that." Beatrice crossed her arms, listening. Pamela stood rigid, her guard still up. Christian just watched, silently, giving his brother space to speak. Macon looked at Beatrice. "You're the soul of this place, and I never recognized that. I treated you like you were replaceable, but the truth is, without you, nothing here works." Beatrice felt tears in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Macon turned to Pamela. "And you. You're brilliant, dedicated, strong, and I diminished you. I treated you like you were worthless, but you are worth it, more than I ever recognized." Pamela pressed her lips together, fighting back her emotions. She didn't want to forgive, not yet, but the words touched something deep inside her, and then Macon turned to Christian. The two looked at each other, brothers separated by time, united by pain. Macon took a deep breath. "And you, Christian, my brother, the person I should have protected. I abandoned you, I hurt you, I humiliated you, and there's nothing I can say to change that." Christian felt his chest tighten, but he didn't look away. Macon continued, his voice breaking now. "But I want to try. I want to be better, not for what I was, but for what I can be." He looked at everyone. "And that goes for all of you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective, heavy but honest. Beatrice was the first to move. She took a step forward. "You hurt a lot of people, Macon. You hurt them deeply." Macon lowered his head. "But," Beatrice continued, her voice firm, "I saw you trying, and that matters. It doesn't erase the past, but it shows that the future can be different." Macon looked up, surprised. Pamela was still silent, processing. Finally, she spoke. "I'll need time." Macon nodded. "I understand." Pamela took a small step forward. "But I'll give you a chance, one chance to prove you've changed. Just one." Macon felt something loosen in his chest. "Thank you." And then everyone looked at Christian. He was the centerpiece, the link, the reason for it all. Christian was silent for a long moment. Finally, he walked up to Macon. They stood face to face. Two boys who grew up together, separated by life, reunited by the truth. Christian held out his hand. Macon looked at his hand, then at his brother's face, and then, for the first time in 24 years, they touched. It wasn't a hug. Not yet. But it was a start. "Let's try," Christian said softly. "One day at a time." Macon held his brother's hand tightly, as if it were the only real thing in the world. "One day at a time," he repeated. Beatrice wiped her eyes with her apron. Pamela smiled, still cautious, but hopeful. And at that moment, inside that simple diner, something miraculous happened. It wasn't complete healing. It wasn't instant forgiveness. But it was the possibility, the promise that maybe, just maybe, people can change, and that it's never too late to fix what's broken. When love reveals itself in the little things, the months that followed were spent rebuilding. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, but it was real. Macon changed, not overnight, but brick by brick, gesture by gesture. He started sitting with employees during breaks. At first, the silence was uncomfortable. No one knew what to say, but little by little, the conversations began to flow. Beatrice told stories about her childhood in the South, about how she learned to cook from her grandmother. Macon listened, really listened, asking questions, interested. And Beatrice, surprised, discovered that talking to him wasn't so bad after all. Pamela talked about her education degree and her dream of teaching children, about how hard it was to work all day and study at night. Macon listened and, the following week, adjusted her schedule so she could leave earlier. Pamela was speechless. "You don't have to do this." Macon shrugged. "I know, but I want to do it." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. With Christian, the relationship was more complex. They worked side by side, but there was still a distance. Not out of anger, but out of caution, like two wounded animals approaching slowly. One day, Macon called Christian to the office. Christian entered cautiously. "What is it?" Macon took a deep breath. "I found more photos of the orphanage." He placed an old envelope on the table. Christian opened it. There were several photos, the two of them, always together. In one of them, Christian was laughing, hugging Macon. "I didn't remember that," Christian murmured, touching the photo carefully. Macon smiled sadly. "Neither did I. But now I remember." The two remained silent, looking at who they once were. Christian put the photos in his pocket. "Thanks for showing me." Macon waved. "I wanted you to know that that boy still exists. In me." Christian looked at his brother. "I know. I can see him slowly coming back." The weeks turned into months, and the diner became something different. More than just a place to work. It became a home. For all of them. Beatrice brought cakes from home, trying out new recipes. Pamela organized a small library in a corner with donated books. Christian painted the walls a warmer, more welcoming shade. And Macon learned to be part of it, not the boss. He washed dishes when necessary. He cleaned tables. He served customers. Not out of obligation, but because I finally understood. Everyone there was equal. One night after work, the four of them were sitting at a table, sharing leftover food, talking about nothing and everything. Beatrice was telling a funny story. Everyone was laughing. Macon looked around, at those people, at that place, and he felt something he hadn't felt in decades, belonging. He wasn't perfect. He still made mistakes. He still had hard days. But I wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Christian noticed his brother's gaze and smiled. He didn't need to say anything. Macon understood. It was then that Christian felt it was time. Time to reveal the secret you've been keeping. Not about Macon, but about yourself. "Can I say something?" Christian said, interrupting the conversation. Everyone looked at him, attentive. Christian took a deep breath. "When I discovered who Macon was, I had two paths. I could destroy it or I could save it." Macon tensed. Christian continued. "And I realized something. The anger I felt wasn't just for him. It was for me, too. Anger at myself for having remained small, for having hidden, for not having lived." Pamela lightly touched his arm. "It wasn't your fault, Christian." Christian smiled gratefully. "I know. But I carried that guilt anyway, and when I confronted Macon, it wasn't just to save him. It was to save myself, too." He looked at his brother. "Because I realized that as long as I hated you, I would never be free. And I wanted to be free. I wanted to truly live, not just survive." Macon wiped his eyes, moved. Christian continued, "Now to everyone. And you taught me this. Beatrice, with her kindness even when it was difficult. Pamela, with her strength even when she was tired. And you, Macon, with your courage to change even when it seemed impossible. You guys showed me that life isn't about being perfect. It's about being human, about trying, about starting over." Beatrice took Christian's hand, her eyes shining. "You saved us too, my son, more than you know." Pamela agreed, smiling through her tears. Macon stood up and walked towards Christian. And then, for the first time since they were children, the two embraced. It was a long, tight hug, full of everything they couldn't say: forgiveness, love, pain, hope, all mixed together. And when they let go, they were both crying. But they were different tears, of healing, of freedom. Beatrice and Pamela came together, wrapping the two in a group hug. And there, in that simple cafeteria, among old chairs and worn tables, the greatest miracle of all happened, hurting people choosing to love anyway. The secret, Christian realized, was never about revealing the past. It was about building the future, together, one day at a time. And in that moment he finally understood what it meant to have a family. Not the one that blood gives you, but the one that life offers you. When you have the courage to open your heart and let love in, even when everything inside you says not to trust. Macon looked at his brother, at Beatrice, at Pamela, and he whispered emotionally, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Christian smiled. "We didn't give up, because families don't give up." And that night, when everyone went home, they took something precious with them, the certainty that no matter how broken we are, there is always a way back. The beginning of everything. 6 months later, the diner had a new sign. All the bulbs worked. Macon insisted on changing them himself, and below the name of the establishment he added something, a home for everyone. Christian arrived that morning and smiled when he saw her. Macon was at the door, nervous, waiting for the reaction. "Did you like it?" he asked. Christian nodded, thrilled. "It's perfect." The two entered together, side by side. Brothers again. They didn't erase the past, but they built something new on it. Beatrice was making pancakes, humming softly. Pamela organized the books in the small library, which already had almost 50 titles. And the diner, which was once just a place to work, was now a home. Christian served the first breakfast to an elderly gentleman who came every day. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," Christian said, smiling. The man smiled back. "Good morning, my son. As always, this place warms my soul." Christian felt his chest warm. This was the greatest reward, knowing that that space meant something to people. Macon passed by carrying a tray. He stopped beside Christian. "Can you believe it?" Christian looked around. "At what? That we did it? That we changed things?" Christian smiled. "We don't change things, Macon. We change ourselves." Macon agreed, and that changed everything. At the end of the day, when the last table has been cleared and the last chair has been turned, the four of them sat together, as they always did now. Beatrice sighed, tired but happy. "What a good day." Pamela agreed. "Every day is a good day now." Macon looked at each of them. "I don't know how to thank you." Christian touched his brother's shoulder. "You give thanks by living and loving. That's all." And there, in that diner that witnessed so much pain, he also witnessed the greatest of miracles, transformation. Because in the end, we are all unfinished stories, waiting for someone to believe in us. Christian looked at Pamela, who was smiling. He looked at Beatrice, who was watching him with maternal affection. He looked at Macon, his brother, finally found, and he realized that life is not about perfect endings. It's about courageous beginnings, about choosing love when it would be easier to choose anger, about reaching out your hand when it would be safer to keep it in your pocket. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever needed to forgive someone who hurt you deeply, or perhaps you were the one who needed to be forgiven? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes our words can be the light someone needs to start over. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends, because stories of hope need to be told, and you never know who needs to hear it today.